Hey everyone, Alex Talanda here, and welcome to our bonus content as we work on putting Ostium Season 6 together. We're continuing with our Behind the Ostium series as we go in depth with the making and discussion of how each episode of Ostium came to be, as well as much more. I am joined by Dwayne Farver, a big fan of the show and creator of the spin off podcast Manifestations. If you enjoy the Behind the Ostium series, you can get full access to over 50 episodes right now by supporting Team Ostium on Patreon at patreon.com/ostiumpodcast. You'll also get access to a bunch of other bonus content on there too. Once again, that's patreon.com/ostiumpodcast. We'll continue working on getting Ostium Season 6 ready for release in 2022, but for now, sit back and enjoy another episode of Behind the Ostium. Welcome to another Behind the Ostium, and this time we are kicking in headfirst to Ostium Season 4. So I was pre-listening to the episodes of Ostium Season 4, taking lots of good notes. Dwayne's done the same thing, and we're going to kind of bring you insight into kind of what I was doing as I was writing and creating these episodes, and then kind of Dwayne's perspective on what he saw and listening to the episodes, what he thought as a fan, as a writer, as a podcast listener. I'm going to start them off like I like to do with my initial notes that I had written before I started the season, kind of my loose outline of what I wanted season 4 to go with. So here is my overview, as I call it. Okay, in this season, the plan is that we're going to have back and forth of Monica and Jake/Dave episodes until they eventually meet up and fight each other. So that is what happened. So that's good. With these overview notes, sometimes something totally unusual gets written down that never actually happens because the characters drive the script in a different way and in a whole new direction, and I never change it back here. So it's kind of fun to have these little Easter eggs here that sometimes show hints of where the show could have gone and sometimes does not in any way. We can have some sort of event going on, noise making that gets heard and or experienced in each episode with characters reacting to it. This is how we know they're in the same world. So that's the strange booming sounds we get in each episode. Plan to have them reunite in episode 35, either towards beginning or at the very end, which does happen at the very end of that episode. We can have Monica looking around, going to the area she wasn't allowed before, also checking out her old place and Steve's place. These happen in this. So far, I'm sticking pretty much true to my outline. Jake and Dave wander around trying to work things out, can have them find or get Monica's recording somehow to learn about the Ostium network. I think that was to do with the data pad, which didn't quite happen, though the data pads did feature in the episodes. As soon as Dave comes through, things start to get weird for him as he begins the process of remembering where he is, how it seems familiar, and remembering who he is, who in capital letters. Also, once they start getting Monica's recordings, Dave remembers more and more. So this was my plan, I think, with the data pad to have Dave kind of help him remember more of his past in the Ostium network. But he ended up not going that way. I ended up just having Dave kind of go through having these different triggers around him that kind of brought these memories back piecemeal that kind of built up in him. We'll need to decide when he reveals this to Jake and can have them go into Monica's place and Dave's place as he remembers where they are. Can have a detail or two from Monica's place that perhaps tells Dave that either Monica or someone has been here, and he begins to get his hopes up. So that we kind of had pretty much in the episodes as it happened. As for Jib, this is a slightly different one to the one they know, so can have subtle off details that Monica recognizes and eventually Dave does too. I did do that with it being set further in the future, so there's some fun architecture and stuff going on. Eventually have them checking out the rest of the island and perhaps have areas where time is fragile and reality is thin and something is leaking through somehow. So this is my little hint about, and I hadn't linked it here with the booming sounds that were going on, but I think that's my kind of initial notes that eventually would lead to those connecting and what happens towards the end of the season. Ending of the season will need to lead up to Jake needing to somehow face the woman and put a stop to what's been happening at Ostium and end her reign. So that's pretty much the finale there. So good, I did have that right. can have a lost spin with setup for getting Jake's and Monica's recordings, also Steve's, and that perhaps this was an elaborate setup all along to find out what was on the other side, and more for monitoring than actually carrying out yet. Basically, they were the guinea pigs before Ostium got up and going. So that's exactly there is one of those little, like, a possible little storyline I just threw in here as an idea and did not pan out that way, which I'm happy with, because I feel that particular little storyline has a kind of finite end to it that wouldn't lead to what actually happened in the main storyline with the strange and unusual things that did happen. Can have birds singing here and insects indicating it's a different Ostium network. I think I did plan for that, and then I believe I just forgot to put it in, so that just never happened. Basically, I'll just admit to that now. Jake and Monica will have to go through one of 3 thin zones, or possibly all 3. I have no idea what that means, and that's all I wrote there, so that's not going to help much. Anyway, that was the final little note I had for my outline. So I feel actually as outlines go, I stayed pretty faithful to it, and then also went on kind of its own storyline once it got going, kind of leading towards the finale of its own thing, and kind of moved away from that. So Dwayne, what, if you can try and remember coming into season 4 after the kind of finale of season 3, did you have any ideas or preconceptions of what season 4 might bring?
I believe I did, and I expected it to have more answers.
Of course not.
We had a lot of new questions, but we had answers too.
Yes, but just more questions too, because it's always that way.
but in similar to when we get the story of Monica on the boat, and we there's a lot of answers given to us then. I expected a lot now that, you know, when we find Monica's back at Gibraltar, the Rock, that I'm like, oh, now we're gonna find out a lot. But then she's there alone, and I'm like, so I even wrote that down, all alone on the rock, because it fits. I mean, it's Ostium. Of course, no one's going to be there.
I mean, the name of the first episode is "One is Still the Loneliest Number."
Yep.
Referencing previous season. Yep.
So, other than that, I expected there to be a lot more, and we do over the course of the season. We do get a lot of answers. But I expected that first episode to be a lot, just a dump of here's what's really going on, or at least most of what's really going on.
And that's kind of what happened beginning of season 3 with Monica, like, well, I'm stuck here, so I need to kind of go through what I went through and reveal all this stuff. But it was different this time. Yeah, because I know I definitely intentionally set some stuff to be kind of mimicking similar to season 3, but also I wanted to make it different too.
Yeah, and it was good because, again, like you said, you don't want to just have tons of character exposition.
Yeah,
but she's alone.
Yeah,
you have to. So the way she did it was good, because she was telling stories about when there were people there. She was talking about what she did when she was there, things like that. Well, of course, over the episodes.
Yeah.
I did write down that I liked how she asks herself questions, basically asking herself what was the Ostium network really up to? Did they even really tell her and everyone else working there what was really going on?
Well, by having her be actually back there at this ground zero place, I think it kind of made her like, and not having the people there before, she couldn't do this as much because their big brother was always watching and all this stuff. Now that she's there and she has carte blanche to do pretty much whatever the hell she wants, and she will because she's Monica, she's able to do this sort of stuff.
Exactly. And the one I just wrote it down, I was like, why all the food? How long was the thing supposed to last? And I believe later on one of the characters even actually asks that. And I like that she goes to the dock. I did write that down too, because ties back to, again, you said like season 3, but I like that she says that the dock hasn't been used in a very long time. You can tell, and I'm like, okay.
Right.
And I do have a question. She goes into her love of coffee.
Yes.
Which is off character for Monica, but she comments on that of course she needs the ostium tea, but so
But
I was just
I mean,
wondering.
the point of that also was that all she could get was tea, where she in the other ostium, in Ostium the town. Whereas now, all of a sudden, it wasn't so much that she was obsessed with coffee, so much as she hasn't had coffee in what feels like a very long time for her, and now she gets to have it. That was the main reason. Yeah,
and of course, the ostium tea actually has a function. So
exactly, yep. Which I had to come. So there you got that answer. And that was the previous season. Yeah.